Everybody, and welcome to Brand Talk, another way to talk. This is the place where we talk about brands and we don't yell, we don't scream, we don't carry on. All we do is chat. We talk. We do things the old fashioned way. We enjoy it. And today we have a very, very special guest who is going to take me back in time when I was a theology minor at St. Francis College in Brooklyn in the early 1970s. And let me introduce through a bio my guest today, who I'm very, very, very fortunate to have. His name is Chris McCartney. He was originally from Texas, and Chris came to Southern California in 1988. He's been a producer, a director, and editor since the 1990s. He got his start as a producer with Prime Sports, ESPN, beginning in 1992. He started Cam Productions, which opened in Santa Monica. The facility expanded to locations in Culver City, Burbank, and Santa Clarita. The studios edited and produced films, animation, special effects, composing, and graphics. In 1996, Chris was hired by Sony Columbia Studios to be one of the first HD high definition producers. He worked both here in LA and in Japan, and with his other company. Now, talk about bad branding. He's going to kill me for saying this. Listen to this brand name. NMMBSM Inc. Cam Productions. It became one of the largest facility for ringtones, wallpaper, and content for the mobile carriers worldwide. Cam produced and edited shows for A&E, Fox, HBO, Showtime, Discovery, and the Disney Channel. And without any further ado, after me giving him a little bit of heat on his brand name there, it's with great pleasure that I introduce you to a grand brand whose name is Chris McCartney. Welcome, Chris. What are you doing with all those vowels and consonants? My God, what kind of a brand name is that? Go ahead.
Okay, John, that was a holding company that I was so fortunate back in those days. I had a group of investors, and it was all these guys in Beverly Hills, the guys that did the horror films. They did Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street. It was Mustafa, Key, Joe Wolf, Murray Moss, and like that and everything. We formed that group to do films, and they were investors and like that thing. What it was is it was an acronym for Nightmare Mobile, Be Seen Mobile. And that's when we formed that just to do the ringtones and that and everything. And in fact, the funniest thing was the theme from Halloween. That ended up being the second largest popular ringtone of all time.
I can imagine that.
I can imagine it was huge.
Well, since this is a show on Brand Talk, one of the things I always tell my clients and anybody that wants to listen here on Brand Talk is that you never use letters to identify your brand. That only happens after years and years and years when people know AT&T meant American Telegraph and Telegram. No, but a telephone and telegraph. Even though most people don't know that today. So what I really want to do is it would have been better for you to read, to not give me the letters, but to give me
Right.
the name, that would have been better. And then I would have said, what does that mean in terms of letters using corporate culture? But no,
Yeah. Yeah. You're
what
right.
I'm doing, I want to make that a teachable moment, and I hope I'm not being pedantic here as much as what I'm trying to do is teach our listeners something about branding, of which you're going to tell me a lot about, because your brand is that you're just not only an artist, you're a business person, as evidenced by the fact that you were asked by Sony to sell high definition, their high definition product to
Yes.
the movie makers. Go ahead, studios. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, that was kind of interesting because I always tell people that I think I went over to Sony consulting and then full time. I think it was in 95, 96. But I always say I was doing HD when HD wasn't cool. And in
Wow.
those days, every filmmaker, from Spielberg on down, hated high def. They looked
Is
at it as
that
being
right?
chip. Oh, yes, they
Holy.
looked upon it as being video. They looked upon it as being, if you can't afford to shoot your film the proper way, you used HD. Now, I have a tech background, so I was sitting on all these panels and talking to studios all the time. But you'll like this, John, in terms of branding and stuff. I would tell them about HD, and they'd say, "Oh, but film looks better." And I say, "Well, if you're right, how's HD going to look in a couple of years versus film? It's going to get better and better and better." And they'd say, "Oh, yeah, but people like to hold film and like this and stuff." And here's one of the things I do, John. I go, "I'm sorry, where are they? Uh, where are the typewriters in your office? I don't see them." I said, "I'm sure Smith Corona thought the typewriter was going to be around forever." I
That's
said,
right.
"But believe me, when things go digital like that stuff," but to make a long story short, where are we today? Everything is on HD, and HD, if you like film, great, but you can't say that it's, better and stuff, and it's faster, cheaper to do it on HD. But that's what my charter was there, and I worked in Tokyo, and then I worked over here, basically trying to get it to filter out, through the industry and get, I was trying to get Panavision to pick up some cameras, trying to do this stuff, and that's what I was doing with Sony.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would think you might have gotten some heat for being perceived, quote unquote, as this promoter, as opposed to the artist, and that must have gotten you a little sore, because here you're trying to do the most creative thing possible, and you're being labeled as such. I like you maybe to address that.
Yeah, it was basically like, well, Chris and Sony are pushing HD because they're not real filmmakers, or
Yes, yes.
they're not a Spielberg or a Coppola, because they would never ever shoot on HD. And anybody who's a filmmaker, it kind of reminds me back in the days of, the early 60s when television came along, and they're saying, "Oh, no movie star would ever do television." I
Right.
mean, my gosh, you're a movie star, you're television. It was the same type of scenario on a technical side, where it's like, "Oh, no filmmaker worth his salt would ever consider shooting on HD because they viewed it as video."
What was your secret in getting people to adopt, I should say, the HD?
Well, like everything else in technology, anytime something comes out new, or it keeps coming out in more and more, more and more new versions, three things always happen. It always gets faster, it always gets better, and it always gets cheaper.
I love it.
Same with computers, same with, phones. I mean, you look back, the first PCs were like $5,500 for a PC in 1980s. Now, you couldn't spend that on a personal computer unless you bought a 65-inch screen TV to go with it. So
Yeah.
what happened is as they started to adopt it, it started to get better and better, and the prices. And then the other thing too is when you are producing films, time is so important because you're burning through money and you're having to do setups and things. Well, once they realized with HD, you can shoot so much faster than you can on film because you're not swapping out a lot of things. You can light faster, you can do more with it and stuff. So
Sure.
as it started coming about, the pure economics took over, and everybody, whether you liked it or not, the studios eventually forced you to do it because they were saying, wait a minute, this is a 9-month shooting schedule. We can drop it to a 6-month if we use HD because we can do more cameras, faster setups, more things with it. We can do more in post. If you're doing special effects now, you can't shoot on film because everything has to be pulled in at ILM or any of the big places digitally. So it was just like I said, the same as typewriters. Why aren't there any typewriters around anymore and stuff? Because word processors came in, and when word processors came in, nobody looked back, and the same thing happened with HD.
And what do you think was the precipitating factor? Or let me walk that back. How did you get them to experiment with the HD? When they said in The Wizard of Oz she had to learn it for herself. How did you get these directors or producers or the decision makers to make that decision or make it their decision to use the HD? Was there a technique that you used?
Yeah, a lot of times, and where it first started, we used to see so much being done in HD was anytime there was compositing or special effects. And now, of course, you look at movies today. My gosh, the Marvel movies, the Star Wars movies, all of those special effects just drive them and stuff. As movies started to get more and more sophisticated and they wanted better special effects, they automatically said, well, we got to go to HD because HD is the only way we're going to get this shot. It's the only way it's going to look right. It's the only way we're going to be able to get, put the spaceships in there with the shot and do all of this. Right. So as the technology got better and better, and they wanted to do more with film and make more special effects or aliens or create characters or cartoon-like things, then HD, it was like they looked at that and then they looked at film, and that's when they began to get unhappy with film and go, well, that's not any good. That looks great. That looks bad.
All right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. By the way, you're listening to Chris McCartney, who is producer par excellence. And this is Brand Talk, another way to talk, where we talk about brands in a different kind of way. And I really want to talk a little bit about Chris, since this is a show about brands. What would you say your brand is? Are you a videographer? I know you say you're a producer, but are you a videographer? Are you a graphics person? Are you a shooter? How do you perceive yourself when it comes to this move? When you go and do your elevator pitch, not that you have to do an elevator pitch at this point in your life because you are established, but if you you're in a different country and nobody knows you, I'm Chris McCartney and I
definitely producer. And putting all the elements together. Yeah, before I became a producer, when I was in Texas, I worked in outside sales and marketing, but very large, like IBM level, multi-million-dollar deals. So I had teams that worked for me, and I learned how you put them together, how you manage teams, how to manage expectations, the people, and get things done. And producing is that way, definitely. In fact, when you're working with actors and actresses, the dynamics and the things that happen are just unbelievable. So you're always constantly trying to get it done and at the same time get everybody pulling in the same direction and stuff. So definitely a producer. I love putting it all together. When I had my post-production facilities, I had so many film companies come there because I could, put it together, and I had the facility there. So it was like, hey, Chris, please produce our film because we know you can do it, and plus you've got the facility stuff. So if I had to say anything, it's because I am a people person. Right. Definitely producer.
Right. Well, and people don't really understand how challenging being a producer is, and most people don't even know what a producer does. And since I've been around tangentially movies and commercials and all of those kinds of things, and I myself was a producer, I get it. But people don't realize how challenging and how difficult it can be, that you are basically, if I could use a blue collar term, you are what we would call the general contractor. So you have to bring all of these subs together and organize the different personalities to get the shot.
And you've got so many times, you've got so many conflicting goals within a film, and you've got personalities and you've got egos and stuff. And it becomes a real, like you say, it's kind of like you're a general contractor walking on a high wire. So it's like you're trying to get it done, but yet you're walking this thin wire and stuff. In fact, we had two sayings that I absolutely believe when you're doing films. One of them is, when you're doing a film, because whatever you start out with, it's never going to end up like that. And we used to always say, hey, on a film, nothing changes but the changes. That's just it.
I love it.
That was number one. And then when we were doing films, and a lot of times I did edit some of my own films and stuff for HBO and Showtime. But the other one we had was a saying, which I totally love: you never finish a film, you abandon it. And that is so true, because even when you're done, and you're sitting in the theater or you're watching it for the first time, the only things that go through your heads, and also the directors, is like, oh, we should have done that, or I should have held that shot a little longer. I should have that. So, like I say, you never finish a film, you abandon it.
Yeah. Well, what I was kind of shocked at when I was younger, I found this out very, very early in my career. I was exposed to New York theatrical actors that worked with Brando, Ira Kazan, that whole crowd that dabbled a little bit in film. And I don't have to tell you that the theater people did not perceive the film people too well, and vice versa.
It was sort of like the film versus HD. The theater people say, I'm not going to stoop that low to do film.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. And the guys that, when you take a look at Marlon Brando, the New York theatrical group thought that it was anathema, him going and doing all these film things, because he was such a traitor.
A traitor. He's turning his back on the theater and doing something, blasphemy film.
That's right. And I've always looked at it as the theater being more real to the audience. I'm sorry, the theater being more real to the actors, and film being more real to the audience. So that I find it difficult when I go to the theater and I'm looking at a set, to believe that is in fact, a ship. I can't believe that. But when I am watching a film and they're shooting on location at sea,
right,
man, does that really resonate with me. And that's the way I kind of looked. And to be fair, I always liked film much better than the theater. And because of that, my teachers thought I was a vulgarian. What did I possibly know? Because I liked my film. But
your own blasphemy there, huh?
Well, my own blasphemy. My own blasphemy.
I will say this because I'm a big fan of the theater, and it's kind of hard, like you say, it's kind of hard even to compare the two. The thing I do like about the theater, and particularly about opera and about theater, is that when you go and see that performance, it'll never, ever happen again. That's it.
Wow.
The next night they'll do it, but it isn't going to be the same. It's always going to be a little different. The acting's going to be a little different. So the thing about, think about theater, that like the immediacy of it, and when you're watching it and it's person to person, that it becomes something that is a completely different experience than film.
Yes, yes. And, and I was going to college and I was in high school at the time of Tennessee Williams. So Tennessee Williams. So I had to see every Tennessee Williams play. I mean, I remember going to see the Glass Menagerie with my mother and father, and there was a line in it, rise and shine, and that was the line that my mother always used to use, which I hated. I hated that line, and the characters that were in it were just they were Italian, but they weren't Italian. That was very, very funny.
I think the best thing about Tennessee Williams plays is they usually don't last longer than one day.
Yeah.
Like if you go to see Morning Becomes Electra, it's sort of like take a cot, take a cup, take a breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and that way you can make it through Morning Becomes Electra, because his plays were just
well, but as a kid, you thought that. But if you said it, once again, you were a barbarian, vulgarian. You couldn't do that. And it really left for me a bad taste in my mouth, and I really gravitated more towards movies. And the other thing I like you to address about the movies, because I've done a workshop on how to get a role, or how to market yourself when you're going to a casting. And I never understood the relationship between casting directors, producers. Who makes that decision? I mean, how do you get a part other than not doing Me Too? But I shouldn't bring that up, because it's not even you can't do things like that. But go ahead.
It's again, and being a producer, this is where it's kind of like it's a difficult part of the job. Many times, if you have a really strong director and a really strong casting person, their egos in play, and what they want is maybe not what the producer wants, or even what the director wants, and stuff like that. So a lot of times casting decisions are sometimes made for the wrong reasons and stuff. I will say this, though. One of the things that has changed, and it's not for the better, is now, because of the internet and because of publicity and Twitter and reach and all of that, I see more and more films being cast where they'll say, hey, we need to put this person in because they've got X million followers on Facebook. So you're getting an audience. Because needless to say, Hollywood is probably, they always say, Hollywood is racist because they won't, put, black or brown people. No, Hollywood isn't racist. Hollywood only sees one color, green. If it's money, everything will happen. And now more and more decisions on casting are because they'll look at somebody, you'll see YouTube stars, being cast in films, because the studios go, well, if they've got 2 million followers, we'll cast them in a film, because we're going to equate it to getting 2 million people coming to see the film. So that's kind of one of the things that changed. But you're right. A lot of times the decisions on casting, and I don't know what to tell, young actors and actresses, just, do your best. I would be lying to say, a lot of times it's who is your agent, what is your relationship with a studio or with the producer, or with the director type of thing. So it's just a bunch of different reasons, but more and more are being made because of the we call it the follow factor. It's like, how many people like you, how many people follow you, do you have this, the films that are being done now, I can see why they're casting certain people, because they're going, oh wait, this person probably wouldn't be good for the role, but it's going to bring in a whole nother dynamic of people that are going to come and see it just because of them.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, and I feel sort of proud of myself because in this webinar that I did, I mentioned that you have to get your social media following up, because that's exactly what goes on in the decision making. How
Oh,
many
it's
followers that
more and
you
more
have,
now.
and
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
it just goes to show you.
I,
Uh, Go
I
ahead.
would think if you walked into a casting call, and you were nice looking and had, a certain degree of acting talent, and then you plop down that you had 10 million Facebook followers, you could not only star in that movie, you could probably get it funded.
Right.
They would look at it that way,
Sure.
and they would
Sure.
say like that, which I
Sure.
don't think is the best reason to make a movie, but
No,
it's
no,
the
I
reality
got it.
now.
I got it. You're listening to Chris McCartney, producer on Brand Talk, another way to talk. Let's get into your recent project, which
Yes.
fascinated me when David said, I got a guy that you two would hit it off tremendously. He's doing this Jesus project or Jesus documentary. And my ears perked up because my minor is in theology. I was a Franciscan monk for
Yeah.
5 years. This is something that is interests me. I have a dear friend, Mike Steinhauser, who's a Jesus scholar in Toronto, Canada. So anyway, I'd like you to talk a little bit about what's going on there, and where can we see it, and all of that sort of stuff. So I've talked too much so far. Go ahead.
Here's how it came about, John. It was quite interesting. I'm a history major myself, and stuff. And my emphasis is European history and American history. And I always tell people I don't think I've read a fiction book pretty much my entire life, because I just read biographies and things like that and stuff. Well, the pastor at our church, Greg Laurie, who people might know across the country, he's quite large and stuff. He advises Donald Trump. He's, big thing, and he's actually been in movies and stuff. But he put out a book called The Jesus Revolution. Now, this was the one that took place in the 70s. You remember it. I
Sure.
remember it. Stuff that at the end of the 60s, when everything was in turmoil, up popped this movement. And all the hippies basically said, gee, maybe, we shouldn't be doing all these drugs and living this lifestyle, and maybe we should take a bath and find something better to do. And lo and behold, up popped the Jesus Revolution. Well, I read his book, and then I got interested in it. And Billy Graham wrote a great book on it. And then another gentleman by the name of Larry Estridge wrote a book. And I read all of them. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is very, very important history. Not just from a Christian standpoint, but in America. There's churches today, huge churches that all sprang out of it. Harvest Rigo sprang out of the Jesus movement of the 70s. Calvary Chapel, the Vineyard, all of it. It was worldwide. It was in Europe. It was in the UK. And as I read more on it, I was like, this is, something. And why hasn't somebody done a documentary on this? Well, lo and behold, I'm very fortunate. My wife was actually a big part of it. She was with Ken Gullickson when he started the Vineyard, which today is over 2,500 churches worldwide.
Wow.
And she was with him when he started it, and when they were having revivals and Sunday services out on the beach. She was there when Bob Dylan got baptized. Remember that? And he became
Wow.
a Christian. She was there. She was with Hal Lindsey, just the whole thing. She kind of like was walking through the history of it, knew the founders of Christian rock, Larry Myers and Chuck Girard. So when I started talking to her about it, she started telling me stories. And I said, you know what? Because I haven't produced a film in about 7 years. I've been involved in a couple smaller ones and stuff, and consulting and helping. But I said, let's do this. I said, this is important history. And I said, but before I really pulled the trigger, I said, I got to see if I can do it right. So I got all the books, and I reached out to the 4 leading scholars on the movement, a gentleman by the name of Larry Estridge, Dave Hoyt, John Boostrom, and Andrew Whitman. And three of them have written books. Larry's is probably the best. Dave's probably second and stuff like that. I talked to them about it, and I was lucky enough and blessed that they came on board. So they're attached to the movie, the documentary, in terms of either writing, producing, appearing, or all three, or one of the above. And then Ken, of course, founder of the Vineyard, he and his wife don't even live that far from us. He's on board. A gentleman that wrote about Lonnie Anderson, who was very, very big in the 70s movement out here in California, he's on board. So when all of that kind of happened, and as I read more and more, I said, this could be a really very interesting documentary. And as people were signing up, people were writing all these great things and all of that and everything. However, though, one thing happened that really changed it all, and this is why the movie today is completely different than what I originally imagined it a year ago. There's so many indications right now that another one is happening. And I say that in both the good and the bad ways. We're looking around right now, and John, you remember 1968 and 1969, what type of how America was and how the social fabric was just being torn apart. The protest against the war, the civil rights, the Democratic Convention, Kent State, all of that and everything. Well, we're looking around today and seeing a lot of similarities today in terms of the fabric of our society and that. And I started doing some more research and saying, well, is it happening again? And I started reaching out to youth groups, and there's some surfing groups out here in California. There's some on the East Coast saying, you kids kind of feel like something's happening. Well, they're all going, yeah, we do. And you look at even bigger developments, Kanye West and his, conversion over, Justin Bieber, all of that. So then I started researching it on this side, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's a lot going on. So I kind of tacked and took the film in a different direction. And that's why the film now is called Jesus Revolution V2, version 2. Yeah. And it's on the internet. You can look up Jesus Revolution V2. And basically what it is the film's going to be talking about what took place in relation to what we're seeing today, and trying to draw the similarities or see what's going on. Because right now there's so many like little, I call them mini fires going on in faith, these groups forming, this happening, get-togethers, young kids. And young kids today too, I think, are is lost in a lot of ways, as much as the hippies were, in terms of looking for meaning in their life. And we've gotten a lot of support on that side too. We've got this great couple that runs youth retreats in Wisconsin and in Florida. They're on board. I've got a youth pastor who's just phenomenal. His name is Jay Peters. He's up in Chicago, and he's going around. He teaches at a Christian school. He's going around and all this, getting them together. He's going to be one of our producers. So we now have this phenomenal team in place, to do the movie. And then one of the big ones we've got is Mario Murillo, who Mario is like an international, figurehead in terms of ministry. In fact, he could get a film just based on his Facebook followers. He could walk into a studio and probably get funded because he's so big worldwide and stuff. He has a blog now. He told me he's got 10 million views on his blog.
Wow.
Over the last year, stuff. So he's going to be kind of like our tour guide for what took place in the 70s, because he started his ministry in 68. In Berkeley and in San Francisco, saw all of that happening. And that, of course, has just carried on since then, and all of that stuff. And then we don't have them yet, but we're talking to a couple of youth ministers that are kind of going to be the other side of the coin. They're going to talk about what's happening now, and then kind of bring it all together and say, here's what was going on then, here's what's happening now.
Now, is this going to be a movie that's going to be seen online? Is it going to be on Netflix? Have you thought about how you're going to distribute it, or that comes later?
The question is yes.
Yeah. Good.
Yes.
Very, very, very good.
Yeah. What we're doing is we're going to go for theatrical, but it's a thing called limited theatrical. And what
does that mean operationally?
What it means is that you're not going to release in like 400 or 500 theaters in one weekend like a studio would do, like a big movie would do. And then you've got smaller movies, like even some of the smaller Christian movies that are released. They might be released in 150 theaters that weekend, and then maybe grow a little bit or do that and stuff. That's what we'll do, is we'll do what's called a limited theatrical, where it will be seen in theaters. It'll do that. And then after that, it'll go international, and then it will go to VOD, video on demand avenues, which of course is the Netflix, the Primes, Hulu, all of those and everything.
I love it. I love it. And what would you say is the theme of this movie, that this Jesus Revolution 2.0 or version V2?
V2, yeah, version 2. The underlying theme is, and we're asking the question, is it happening again? And when we talk to kids, and they'll say, a lot of the kids will say it's happening again. But then when you ask them, gee, did you know it happened before? They go, well, no, we weren't aware of that. We think there's a Jesus Revolution going on, and we're getting together and having one. But you mean there was another one? It's
Right.
like, yeah, there was in the 70s. So it's going to be, is it happening again? And then going back and saying, kind of ping-ponging back and forth and saying, hey, this is happening now, but here's what was happening in 70, like Explo, the big concert that took place in 72 down in Dallas, had like 60,000 people. It had Johnny Cash, it had Chris Christopherson. That was a concert that was going on. We're actually going to have a concert going on called 2,000 Believers and stuff.
Yeah.
But that was going on then, and here's what's going on now.
Yeah.
So as we reach the end of the movie, we basically want to do kind of like a call to action to just say, hey, if you think it is happening again, or you want to be a part of it, hop on the train.
Right. Well, you know what I find interesting, because my religious tradition is Roman Catholic, and I was, like I had mentioned, I was a Franciscan monk. So for 5 years, I would love to see, and I don't know, maybe I'm overstepping my bounds here, but at least I'll throw it at you. I would love to see how the more traditional Presbyterians, Roman Catholics, even Jews for that matter, how are they responding to it? Is it happening again? And what's their perception of it? And, I'll leave that to you to respond to.
I can answer that, because if people go to our site, we have a couple ways they can sign up. They can just sign up. We get their email, and we keep them abreast of what's going on. And then people can also sign up if they want to work on the film, if they want to be a writer or researcher, or they want to appear. And I'll tell you, John, it's very interesting. We get these people, they have the comment section at the end of the little form. Some people will write like 4 pages,
Right.
just telling us about it and like that. And a lot of them, like you say, are coming from a Presbyterian or Catholic background. They go, oh, I remember, I was a Catholic, and then I remember the Jesus Revolution. It changed me that, and I came to this and like that. So it's really kind of been, I can't think of, we've gotten, that many. We haven't gotten anybody joining on a negative basis. Sometimes on Facebook, people will troll and say negative things about the film, and it's, you're silly if you believe in Jesus type of thing. But overall, we've been getting across the spectrum, religions and stuff, from them saying, hey, yeah, I think it's time for one. And even from, we're getting a lot from England, but we're going to be shooting in England and in Europe too, for the film about what took place over there. But I have these 3 girls, it's so nice, from Colombia, and they're writing and saying, please come down here. We'd love you to come down here, because we're having a Jesus Revolution down here, and we'll help, and like that stuff. And it's so nice. So yeah, it's kind of across the board in terms of what people are of all religious persuasions saying.
I remember about 2 years ago, I like Joel Osteen. I find him inspirational. And I put the word on the street. I wanted to go and meet Joel Osteen. So I went to Brooklyn and saw Joel Osteen. And it was my first Joel Osteen event. And let me tell you, it was Christian songs being sung in a rock beat. I could not, before he gets on, his son, his daughter, come on with the electric guitars, doing that whole thing. And as a marketing guy, I'm saying, how is Roman Catholicism dealing with
Gonna
this.
compete.
Okay. And then I'll follow up. I go out to visit my daughter and my grandson out in Arizona. And she says, JT, would you like to go to church with us? And I said, sure. And I don't remember the congregation, but it was this arena, same premise with the rock, it's not holy God, we praise thy name. There's no choir. It's just so motivational. So I understand what exactly what you're talking about. And young, nobody my age there. They're all at the Catholic Church and the Presbyterian Church and the Lutheran Church. Then and I'm just wondering, as a marketing guy, how are they competing? Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting point of that. That actually came out of the Jesus Revolution of the 1970s. There were actual rock guys that said, hey, why don't we do Christian music to rock style? The two main guys that are looked upon as being the founders is Larry Myers and Chuck Girard. And the first recognized group is called Love Song. Now, all of them are appearing in the film. We're very, very fortunate. Love Song is still around. Tommy is over in Phoenix. I saw him last week. They're all over here now shooting for something else. But that's where it came from. And you're right. And now you see it. And Calvary is where they first performed. This was like in 1970, I believe. And they put a band up there. And Tommy even told me they played at that church for the first time. And Chuck Smith was bringing in all these hippies off of the beach, you know, getting them to accept the Lord. And Tommy told me that Chuck walked up to him after and goes, I got to be honest. I didn't really enjoy it that much, but can you come back next week? Because everybody else loved it. You know? And,
That's right.
And even after that, they even went on and started a Christian rock label. That's still around today called Marathosa or something like that. But Chuck Smith and Chuck Girard, they started a label. But you're right. What you're seeing there in all these churches, that came out of the Jesus Revolution, because you're right. Before that, it was an organ and it was a bunch of women, or maybe a bunch of women and men and a chorus, and that was it. And now it's guitars, drums, keyboards, singers, all of that. And that's really more the norm now than like you say, the Catholic Church or Episcopalians or Presbyterians and all of that. Most of the churches now have bands.
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with Jesus Christ Superstar, but remember in this, all right. So when I was in the seminary studying to be a priest, there was this priest called Harold Buckley, Father Harold Buckley, and he knew these two fellows, Rice and Weber, and they were struggling musicians. And they had two plays. One was called Joseph and His Technicolored Raincoat. All right. And the other was Jesus Christ Superstar. Those two plays were performed at Cathedral College of the Immaculate Conception. Father Buckley flew those two guys in and did Jesus Christ Superstar with one caveat, that he had to write in a resurrection that was not in the original Jesus Christ Superstar, and they allowed him to do it. And I'm getting goosebumps up my arm when I remember that, because it was just such a wonderful evening seeing that. And I love Jesus Christ, and I love Joseph in his Technicolored coat, and the critics at the time and the theologians, oh, how could they do such a thing, using rock and roll to talk about the Gospels? Terrible. So I don't know if you know about those guys, but
yeah. Well, John, let me ask you a question. Was the group that performed at the school. Was that the touring group of Jesus
No,
Christ
no,
Superstar?
no, no. It was before it went to Broadway. It were the seminarians.
Oh,
So,
okay.
Weber and Rice gave Father Buckley, because Father Buckley was there for all intents and purposes, their patron. He was the
Ah,
gasoline
okay.
that helped them get along. All right. So they
Okay.
played. So it was first seen in the United States, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong, but one of the first was at Cathedral College of the Immaculate Conception, and they had no money.
Oh,
Chris,
so
these guys had no money. This was 1968, 1969. So,
okay.
go ahead.
Well, have I got a treat for you on that note? Okay, remember it toured before it went to Broadway. It toured
Sure,
around the country. Actually, it toured for 4 years around the world. The Jesus Christ Superstar.
sure.
The gentleman that played Judas is a gentleman by the name of Tyrone Bragg. He now lives in Georgia. He's in our movie, and he's going to be performing in our concert.
Oh, I
And
love it.
he's not the one that was in the movie. That
Right,
was Anderson. Carl
right.
Anderson was the guy in the movie. But Tyrone, for 4 years, played Judas in Jesus Christ Superstar, the tour. If you go to our site or our Facebook, we have a picture of him then, and we got the thing of that. But I've talked to he and his wife, many times. He's down in Georgia. He's all excited. But yes, he's going to be performing, talking in our movie. He actually went to, I think it's Norway, opened a coffee house. That's where he was saved. He has all these stories about it and stuff. And that's one of the things this movie is going to be filled with. Somebody like just, I hear things and I go, oh my gosh. And of course, being a history major, I'm just so upset that I missed him.
Right, right, right. Now, when we got plenty of time. I'm just not one of these interviewers that has to get everything in the last 15 minutes, and then we
Right.
forget something.
Yeah,
I
sure.
what I want to do right now is, how can we keep track of this project? Is there your website? How can we do that? Because what I want to now, after we do the important stuff, which is get all your information out there. I want to talk about the movies, how you see the movies, what do you see going on,
Sure.
and all of that. But what I want to do before anything else is, how do we follow you? What's
Here's
the
what we
best
have.
way to do that? Go
Uh,
ahead.
and it's real simple because it's the way everybody does everything now. We have our site, which is Jesus Revolution V2. It's up
Wait
there.
a minute. Wait a minute. Jesus Revolution V2. Go
V2
ahead. Okay.
version 2. Google that. You go right to it. And then if you want on your site, we'll give you the
Oh
link and
yeah,
all
no,
of
we're
that
going to
stuff.
do all of that. Absolutely.
And then, of course, we've got our Facebook page. And then our Facebook page is the same thing. It's Jesus Revolution V2. They can go to the Facebook page and then they can click and sign up there now. And we're encouraging everybody to sign up for a couple reasons. One is, we're looking at this, like I mentioned, we're looking at the movie is that the movie isn't going to end. The movie's going to be the starting gun
I love
to
it.
get this thing going. So it's going to be like, hey, here's places you can go, here's groups, here's this, and we're going to have everybody, and we're actually going to shoot the end of the movie at the concert. And at the concert, at the end, it's going to be all the people on stage, Mario, Dave, the people. John, we might have to have you up there too if we've got a space there, and our branding isn't going well. I might have to call on you, okay? And but
Anything you need.
okay, but
Anything
we're
you
going to
need.
have that and everything, and so they can go to it and sign up. Our time frame right now, and of course, gee, this is going to shock you, but because of all that's been going on with the Chi-Com virus and all of that, so many things are up in the air. However, saying that, it's actually worked to our benefit. We've gotten so much activity on Facebook and on our site and signups and things like that. We've got about 17 other Facebook sites that are working with us, Mario sites working with us, all of those. So it's kind of really getting out there. At the end of July, we're going to be doing a Kickstarter. And we want to do a Kickstarter just to build community. And also, since we're having the concert and we have so many great things, we're thinking we want to give away these rewards and stuff. And when I was talking to my head marketing guys, Christian projects and Christian films right now are the most profitable the most anticipated
Sure.
films out there. And I say that people kind of look at it wrong. They say, well, the Marvel film made $500 million. Yeah, but they spent $500 million. They got their money back. When you look at a film like I Can Only Imagine, well, that was made for $7 million. It did $87 million.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
which the return is that. So we want to kind of get it out there. And all of us said, hey, Chris, rather than doing traditional film funding, which is getting investors, or me going to you, John, and saying, hey, give me money so I can make a movie. Rather than do it, I told the studios, well, let me just keep it on my own now. So we're going to do a Kickstarter, and that way we can kind of get more into it. And one thing too, let me tell you about this concert that's going to be very unique. And I don't know if you've seen it. Have you ever seen the Rocking 1000s out of Europe?
No, I haven't.
It's a group. Here's what it is. Picture this. It's a concert. They're doing a song, and the best one is the Foo Fighters. They do the Foo Fighters Learning to Fly. To Fly. Great song. Here's what they do though. They have 200 drummers there. They have 200 guitar players, 200 bass players, 200 keyboardists, 500 singers, and they're all doing it to the song. And then there's the people on stage kind of directing it. Well, when I saw that, John, and when you see it, it's so emotional and uplifting, and it just puts a big grin on your face. I said to my guys, can you imagine if we had 2,000 Christians doing this? And that's what the concert's going to be. So that's why we call it the 2,000 Believers Concert. And again, because of what's going on, we don't know where it's going to be, but it's going to be between LA, Orange County, and Palm Springs. So we'll find a place, but right now we can't find a place because they won't let you have any concerts.
Wow.
So but we're going to do that. But when we have the Kickstarter, we're going to encourage people, hey, sign up. And if you pledge, this amount, you could be in the concert. And the concert, of course, is going to be filmed. The other groups are going to be performing on stage. We have Love Song. We've got some people contemporary. We also even have Christian hip hop artists, which I didn't even know there was Christian hip hop, but I got a great guy. His name is Darius West, who did a movie on it called Mic Drop. It's coming out in August, if I can plug it for Darius. And it's called Mic Drop, The Culture of Christian Hip Hop. And it talks about exactly what happened with Christian rock. You had rock and rollers become Christian rock and rollers. You had hip hop that became Christian hip hop performers. And there's bunches of them out today. I've been lucky enough. I've met with Darius. I've met some of them greatest kids in the world. And they're out there doing the hip hop, but cutting out the bad words and putting in some good words. Just really, and they're just phenomenal to see. They're going to be performing, but then we're going to have 1,000 people out there performing songs with the band up on the stage.
Yeah. Well, this is no pun intended, music to my ears, because what is going on is that this movement is responding to what people really want and really what they need.
Yeah.
And it's not this coming down from on high approach. It's meeting people where they are. There is a need. There is something missing in their lives, and what these different groups are doing is hitting them at the right sweet spots. I'm getting goosebumps up my arm. Yeah. I just love it.
And John, you couldn't be more right, because I interface with a lot of kids, at my church and also in conjunction with this project. And you're exactly right. They're looking because they're kind of going, I've got Facebook, I've got my phone, I've got my texting, I've got all this stuff around me, and I'm told I should be happy, but I just feel like I'm really not, or that there's got to be more to life than just getting likes, and that's where we're kind of, and you're right, the message is, it's their choice, but it's like we want to put it in front of them and say, you know what? Right. Look at this. Look at this. Look at what the people are doing here. Look at look at what the kids are doing here. Look at what the people are doing on the beach over here at this concert, all of that and stuff. And you're right. It's I think it's a sorely needed message. And I think it's also one that's just very welcome. And everybody, like I said, the responses we get are just, off the charts.
And kudos to you. And this is not trying to curry favor with our dear friend, David Pride. But what you've been able to do is to identify that social media is where this is best promoted. that is such a. I teach a course in social media, so I know
Yeah.
This is what people have to be doing.
Yeah, and in fact, David, of course, is heading up all of our social media. And he's just doing such a great job. His company's Social Impressions is just fantastic. And you're right, and that's where it is. And in fact, it's interesting. We're tied in with I think 17 Facebook pages, and they total a little over 7.5 million followers.
I love it.
So it's just like, we're not talking about 10 and 12 people getting together and saying, hey, I'm interested in this message. We're talking about very large numbers and very large followings and things like that and stuff. So that's what we need to tap into. And that's also, too, we want to get as many as we can, involved in it. And, of course, we're going to have a lot of them appearing in the film, too, test people talking about, particularly from the 70s, telling their stories. And then, of course, people today, too, talking about their experiences.
Yeah. Well, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be a little selfish. I'm going to ask you about the movie industry and how you see the industry going. And I'm going to relate to you. Last time I went out to see my grandson, Donovan, and I said to Donovan, would you like to go to the movies with Grandpa? And he said, no, going to the movies is boring. I want to watch YouTube. I said, I don't know if my producer friends are going to like this market.
Going to like your grandchild.
Right. But it's not only him. To get his friends to go to the movies is no simple task anymore. And I have an answer to it, but I like you to your theory or your input on what Donovan.
What in terms of where the industry is today?
Yeah, where do you think movies are going?
Well, you remember the book Our Town.
Yes.
And remember the first line in the book? It was the best of times. It was the worst of times.
Yes.
That sums up the film industry right now. And I'll tell you why I say that. And I could see it coming, of course, being at Sony and being on tech, you can kind of see as things start happening what the end result's going to be. And of course, with HD and the technology today, I used to have a bay room, an editing bay room that would have $750,000 worth of equipment in it to edit a film. And it would go for between $300 and $500 an hour, and you would get a gorgeous HD movie out of it. Or if you shot film, but it would still be on HD. That was it, and that's how you could do it. Cut to today, John, your grandson with a laptop and about a $20,000 camera can do technically better quality work than I could in my studios. So what happens when you have that is that it turns into a thing. Everybody's a filmmaker now.
Right.
Everybody can make a movie. Technically, I can shoot a movie on the same level as Star Wars or Marvel. I just have to shoot, 1080p, 30 frame. I have to use and the cameras, that $20,000 camera, that's about 5 times better than the ones I worked with at Sony. And those cameras were between $350,000 and $400,000 cameras. Right. So you can see the economies have come such. So what's happened now in the film industry is you've got so many people out there that can make movies, and a lot of them shouldn't be making movies, but they do. Right. Then on the other side, you also have distribution channels that you never had before. Again, when I was at Sony, it was real simple. Your film went theatrical or it went straight to video. Right. That was it. And if it went theatrical, it was going to end up on video. Right. And then like that. So that was it. Now, like we were talking earlier, where's this one going to go? Well, it's going to go theatrical at a certain level, but then of course it's going to go to what's called video on demand, which is VOD, but that's going to be the Netflix, the Primes, all of those and everything. It's going to go international much simpler than it used to be able to because it's all digital. You just got to hit a button and download it. So it's in some ways it's good because everybody now can kind of get out there and make their vision come true. But like I said, in a lot of ways, people shouldn't be doing it.
Right.
And the biggest problem is the people that are really good filmmakers. Well, they have to compete with the other 10,000 people that aren't good because they're all on the same playing field in terms of having access and having the ability to do it. It's not like it used to be where only Spielberg could get access to Universal and get a film made and get the cameras and get the post time and, get the 35 millimeter film. Now everybody can do it. And, now they are. And like I said, it's the best of times and the worst of times.
Well, with that, I just want to say our time is up. And you really made this not only an enjoyable 1 hour, but an informative 1 hour. And I thank you.
Oh, thank you, John.
And I think this is the beginning of a wonderful relationship.
And John, I just want to say one thing. I don't care what your boss says. I think you're doing a good job. I don't care what he says. I think you're doing an okay job.
Well, that's terrific. Thank you so much, Chris. And
thank you, John.
That we get all that important information out. And
super. Super. And when we do get shooting, please know you got an invitation to come out here. And if you want to do a show or something like that, we'd love to have you.
Oh, I would love it. That sounds great. Thanks again.
Thank you.
So that was Chris McCartney, producer of the Jesus Project. Am I right?
Jesus Revolution V2.
Sorry about that. You got it. Take care.